Rain lashed against the windows, wind howled like a banshee. Inside, Ty sat alone, fire crackling in the hearth. A sudden sharp rap on the door sliced through the storm's symphony. He glanced at the clock. Midnight. Who could be out on a night like this? Ty approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Two children stood on his porch, drenched and shivering. A boy and a girl, no older than 10. He felt a pang of sympathy opening the door a crack. "What are you doing out in this weather?" he asked, voice tight with concern. The children didn't answer. They just stared at him, their faces obscured by the shadows. Ty shivered, feeling a sudden chill despite the warmth of the house. "Let me get you some towels," he offered, stepping back. As he stepped inside, the faint scent of decay wafted in from them, like rotting leaves and damp earth. Ty tried to ignore it, focusing on grabbing the towels to dry them from the storm. He turned back, towels in hand, and froze. The children stood unnaturally still, their faces now illuminated by the living room light from the open door. It was their eyes that stole his breath, chilled him to the bone. They were solid black, devoid of pupil or iris like polished obsidian stones. Ty stumbled back, dropping the towels with a thud. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced his gut. "Who are you?" he choked out, voice trembling. The girl smiled, a slow, unnatural stretching of her lips. "We just need to use your phone, mister," she said, her voice sweet but toneless, like a music box playing a single drawn-out note. Ty couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He had never seen anything like those eyes. They seemed to bore into him, seeing not just him, but something deeper, something he kept hidden even from himself. "There's something wrong with your phone line, mister." The boy spoke for the first time, his voice a raspy whisper. "We just need to call our parents." The boy took a step closer, and Ty felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. "Let us in, mister," the girl urged, her smile widening, becoming grotesque. "It's cold." Their words echoed strangely in his mind, amplified, distorted. He wanted to slam the door, to scream for help, but his body wouldn't obey. He was frozen in place, paralyzed by an unseen force. The boy's eyes seemed to burn brighter, and Ty felt a searing pain in his head, like a hot poker pressed against his skull. He cried out, clutching at his temples, but the pain only intensified. Through the throbbing in his ears, he heard the girl's voice, closer now, filled with a terrifying joy. "Don't fight it, mister," she whispered, her breath hot and fetid on his ear. "It's easier if you don't fight." Ty woke with a gasp, heart pounding. He was sprawled on the floor, head throbbing. He sat up, disoriented, the events of the night flashing through his mind. A nightmare, he thought, relief flooding through him, just a vivid, horrifying nightmare. He looked towards the door, still half expecting to see the children. They were gone. He rose to his feet, unsteady, and checked the locks on the door, twice, then boarded up the windows just in case. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Ty tried to shake off the lingering dread. The imprint of those black eyes burned into his mind. He forced himself to eat, to watch some television, but the fear remained, a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and fear. Ty avoided going out, jumped at every little sound. He saw the children's faces everywhere, in the shadows, in the reflection of the television screen, in the swirling steam from his coffee. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The memory of their eyes, their voices, haunted him. He knew he should tell someone, call the police, but what could he say? That he had a nightmare about children with black eyes? They would think he was crazy. So he suffered in silence, his fear festering, growing stronger with each passing hour. One night, unable to bear the isolation any longer, Ty decided to visit his brother, Ben, who lived across town. He had to tell someone, had to share the burden of this terrifying secret, even if it meant risking his sanity. The drive was agonizing. Every shadow seemed to hold the children, their black eyes watching him, mocking his fear. When he finally pulled up to Mark's house, he was shaking. He pounded on the door, desperate for company, for reassurance that he wasn't losing his mind. The door opened and Ben stared at him, his face a mixture of concern and annoyance. "Ty, what's going on? It's—" He glanced at his watch, 3 in the morning. Ty stumbled inside, words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and confusion. He told Ben everything. About the storm, the children, their eyes, the chilling fear that had gripped him ever since. Ben listened patiently, though Ty could tell he thought he was losing it. When he was finished, Ben placed a hand on his shoulder. "Look, Ty," he said, his voice gentle. "I know you're scared, but it sounds like you just had a bad dream. Those kids weren't real." Ty opened his mouth to argue, but Ben cut him off. "Come on, let's get you some coffee." He led Ty into the kitchen, and that's when Ty noticed it. A small, child-sized handprint on the window above the sink. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. And it was covered in a thick, black ooze. Ty pointed at the window, his blood turning to ice. "That wasn't there before," he whispered, his voice hoarse with terror. Ben followed his gaze and frowned. "What is that?" he muttered, stepping closer to examine the print. As he leaned in, the window shattered, a large shard of glass erupting outward, slashing across Ben's throat. Ty watched in horror as his brother crumpled to the floor, blood gushing from the wound. He heard a child's giggle, high-pitched and filled with delight, coming from behind him. He spun around to see the children standing in the doorway, their black eyes burning with a malevolent light. The boy held a shard of glass in his hand, the edges dripping with Ben's blood. "You shouldn't have tried to fight it, mister," the girl said, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. Ty backed away, stumbling over his brother's body. He scrambled to his feet and ran for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. He rattled the handle, panic rising in his throat. He threw his weight against the door, but it wouldn't give. He was trapped. The children moved towards him, their movements slow, deliberate, like predators toying with their prey. Ty felt a cold despair wash over him. He was going to die here, just like Ben. He closed his eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But the blow never came. He opened his eyes to see the children staring at him, their expressions unreadable. "What are you waiting for?" he croaked, his voice raw with terror. The girl tilted her head, a curious expression on her face. "We're waiting for you to let us in," she said, her voice as sweet and innocent as a child's. Ty frowned. "Let you in? But I didn't." He trailed off, his gaze falling on the reflection in the darkened TV screen. Standing behind him, their faces contorted into grotesque masks of hunger, were not 2 children but 2 figures that defied description. Their eyes, however, were unmistakable. Solid black, devoid of pupil or iris, like polished obsidian stones. His eyes. "Please like and subscribe. I will be forever grateful."